Are you alarmed by the fact that the UK is actually, of the G7, the only economy which is shrinking at the moment?
A good question, and one which the Chancellor deliberately evades.
Well, according to the International Monetary Fund, around a third of the world's economy is in recession this year or will be in recession next year. And that is principally, but not entirely, because of very high global energy prices. We are not immune to that in the UK.
But that doesn't answer the very specific question asked, which was, why is the UK the only economy in the G7 which is shrinking at the moment? The word the Chancellor doesn't want to mention is, of course, Brexit, which is both unique to the UK and which has contributed to UK trade performance falling to its worst level on record, business investment trailing other industrialised countries, and lost output estimated to be worth about £100 billion a year. Just take a look at the UK's trade as a whole. The Office for Budget Responsibility has concluded there's been a 15% reduction in trade intensity as a result of Brexit. It also released this data. The red line shows UK exports. Unlike other advanced economies, the UK's exports haven't bounced back after COVID. The OBR links this to Brexit. And then there's business investment. It peaked in 2016, the year of the Brexit referendum. It's never returned to that level. Then there's the value of the pound. The strength of the dollar has lowered the value of currencies around the world, but the pound has fallen considerably against the dollar since the Brexit referendum in 2016. A weaker pound makes imported goods more expensive, which in turn has contributed to inflation. All of this has led the OBR to forecast Brexit will reduce UK GDP by 4% over 15 years. That's a level of decline worth about £100 billion a year in lost output. But just like the Prime Minister, the Chancellor refuses to acknowledge this. Earlier this week, the Prime Minister told MPs this.
Well, Mr. Speaker, one of the great opportunities of Brexit is our ability to trade more with countries around the world.
Well, let's take a look at how those trade deals are going.
There have been some trade deals, but they've mainly been with countries that Britain already had a trade deal with through the European Union.
In fact, most were already in place before Brexit and have just been rolled over from when the UK was a member of the EU. Since these so-called new deals are virtually identical to the ones they replaced, they will make little, if any, difference to the value of trade between the UK and those countries.
After the pandemic, there was a trade recovery by all the other G7 countries, and Britain's trade recovery has been more or less flat.
It gets worse.
We see the UK pretty close to the bottom of the league table in terms of the forecast for economic growth, particularly in 2023. So the UK essentially sees no growth at all, and the only country that was worse than the UK was sanctioned Russia.
Sunak also told MPs this.
I know the Honourable Lady will actually want to speak to many of the Welsh farmers who are enjoying selling their lamb to the new markets that we have opened up for them.
Well, it's true there's been some new deals, for example with Australia.
We lose 4% of our GDP by Brexit. We gain 0.08% by the government's own estimate through this trade deal with Australia.
Not exactly a cause for celebration. And then there's the trade deal with New Zealand.
British farmers have reacted with shock to the terms of a new free trade deal with New Zealand.
The deal will see Kiwi meat imported without tariffs, and farmers in the UK say they get nothing in return.
It's us surrendering to you, New Zealanders, and giving you a great deal, and we're getting nothing out of it.
The UK has also signed a new deal with Japan, which closely mirrors the EU-Japan trade deal. The UK Trade Policy Observatory estimates the deal will result in no net gain compared to the EU-Japan deal. And then there's this.
We have got people queuing up to come to this country to pick crops that are rotting in fields, to work in warehouses that otherwise wouldn't be operable, and we're not letting them in.
We know that ending freedom of movement has contributed in part to high inflation labour shortages in the UK, which is having a damaging impact on business growth. But again, rather than acknowledge this fact, the Prime Minister has shamelessly tried to blame high inflation labour shortages on benefit claimants.
What's the number one challenge other than energy costs? It's getting access to workers and getting people to actually work. And I strongly believe that part of the answer to this problem is being much tougher on our welfare system.
Well, imagine the shock when he finds out the majority of people claiming benefits are either in work or seeking work. many going without food every day just so they can feed their kids.
So one of my first jobs is to try and restore trust in government, and that starts with being honest with people.